Hi everyone, it's Ash from FPL Hints, here with my FPL Gameweek 3 preview and team selection. As always, if you're able to like, share and subscribe, that would be greatly appreciated. So I'll have a quick look back at Gameweek 2. I'll look at how the team is set for Gameweek 3. Also look at some statistics for how my team stands in relation to other engaged FPL managers. Also, we'll look at the captaincy polling data and EO projections for Game Week 3 and a quick preview of the games as well. So look, without further ado, let's get straight into it and see how it went for me in Game Week 2. So in terms of Game Week 2, scored above the average, but unfortunately it didn't translate into a green arrow, and I'll explain why. So Game Week 2, a lot of discussion on whether managers were going to triple captain Haaland, and although it was tempting, it just didn't really, not that it didn't sit well with me, but it just seemed far too early in the season to take that risk. So goalkeeping situation, Flecken, difficult match against Liverpool, managed to get 6 saves in. So yeah, I knew that it was a red block game, and that was probably the most I could hope for. So fairly content with that. And then onto the defence, mixed bag really. Harwood Bellis against Nottingham Forest only conceded 1 goal, and yeah, could have been a clean sheet on another day perhaps, but he's 4.0. There's not much more I could have hoped for. And you got Robinson, despite conceding against Leicester, picked up an assist and a bonus point. And as a reminder, Robinson kept 9 clean sheets last season and registered 6 assists. So at 4.5 million, with those generous green block games for Fulham, he's definitely one that I'm happy to have had. And he was a direct switch out for Quansah, and in he came, so net 7-point gain. So no complaints there from my side. And then Dan Burn against Bournemouth, 1-1 draw. He actually had a really good header on goal in that Sunday afternoon match. Could have potentially have scored, but yeah, bit disappointing, but fair play. Midfield was reasonable, albeit a mixed bag. So Gordon, same match with Dan Burn, got that goal, really came from nowhere. Newcastle were dreadful for the most part, so 10-point haul there. Gordon is somewhat of a differential. And you got Mohamed Salah, who got his goal and a couple of bonus points against Brentford. So 3 points for Flecken, 10 for Mohamed Salah. I'll take that. And Jota as well in that match got a clean sheet and a assist point. Oh, 3 points for an assist, 1 for a clean sheet there. So in all, I got 19 points from that Sunday afternoon match for Liverpool. But it's really this disappointment here. And Nkunku, with that cameo appearance in an 8-goal match against Wolverhampton, really could have. It was a what could have been if he had started, got more minutes. No doubt could have picked up a fantasy return, and ultimately a fire sale started after Nkunku had limited minutes against Man City, and also even less minutes against Wolves. So that's one I'll talk about in my team selection. Onto the forwards, you've got Havertz, who couldn't really do much against Aston Villa, despite playing a full game. And of course, I've got Havertz to cover Saka, who got 6 points. So net loss there. You got Isak, disappointing against Bournemouth. Very high engage ownership that I'll mention in a moment, but expected far more from him and a potential player that I could potentially sell. But it was really all about Haaland against Ipswich. Basically saved my game week, as it were. Now, at this moment in time, if we look at his ownership in FPL, he's owned by 60%. I remember when the game launched, Haaland's ownership was 30%. And then when we hit game week 1, it was 50%. That really caused a fright for many FPL managers who didn't own him. So glad I at least nailed the captaincy, as it were. So 34 points really saved my overall rank. Many FPL managers, even among engaged managers, can't have Haaland and Salah. I managed to have both, got 44 points, because the difficulty is really about balance. eventually, once Liverpool's green block games subside, I would have to make that decision on whether to sell Mohamed Salah, or if there's form issues with Haaland, potentially sell him. I don't think it's a long-term hold. Obviously, what I'm sacrificing in having Haaland and Salah is not having any premium defenders. And in the case of Harwood Bellis, I had to start him in this instance, but that was more of a one-off type of thing. I'm not relying on 4.0s for starting, as it were. Valdemarson, obviously sub goalkeeper. Harry Winks, who, if I'm not mistaken, got a goal and an assist in the League Cup midweek, so 2 points here. So it'll be interesting to see how many more attacking returns he can get in the actual FPL season itself. Mykolenko, disappointing, but I wasn't expecting him to do much against Spurs. And Everton are seeming like hot relegation favourites once again. And then you got Johnson, who played a full match out of position from what I could see as well. And again, conceded 4 goals, but got an assist. So 3 points for him. So it gives me confidence I can push him up the batting order when Ipswich get a generous run of games, which is not far from the horizon, as it were. So is Johnson, Lundstrom in disguise? Probably not right now, but he's not someone who I just basically ignore as a sub 3 player, as it were. So on the whole, can't really complain massively. 78 points, had 75 points from game week 1, so it's fairly steady and fairly content. On to team selection now for game week 3. As it stands at the time of recording, I've not made my transfer. I was trying not to make any transfers before the international break because I would like to have 2 FTs, and there are some fires I need to address in the team, which I've already alluded to. So in goal, Flecken against Southampton, hoping there's some clean sheet potential there. And then in defence, now Johnson and Robinson starting both in the same game, annoyingly, but then Johnson is the out of position potential. I think Robinson, with him, got the attacking prowess as well. Kind of hoping that this match ends 0-0, probably won't, but fairly hopeful that one of these players could potentially get a clean sheet here. But with Fulham, you've got Smith Rowe, who's done fairly well of late as well for Fulham, but again, just need to see if I could really justify getting him and potentially got Mykolenko. This is really last chance saloon for him against Bournemouth. I hope he doesn't concede another 4 goals, but this defence, apart from Robinson, has got some serious red flags, and ultimately I probably would need a wild card or multiple free transfers. As you know, we can roll up to 5 free transfers for this new season. That would require a lot of surgery, but I wouldn't want to really -4 the defence. But yeah, just for this game week, I'm going to start Johnson and I will be starting Robinson. On to the midfield now. So Jota and Mohamed Salah, we know what Liverpool's fantastic record was against Manchester United with Klopp. Did consider giving Mohamed Salah the captaincy, but for now, that won't be the case. Gordon against Tottenham, we know that Gordon had a really amazing record at home in the Premier League last season, so hoping he can maintain that run now that he's off the mark for the 24-25 season. But really, this is a red flag. And Nkunku, who annoyingly played a full game during midweek as well, and again, so much potential in this Chelsea team. Annoyingly, I've suffered with the price drop there as well. And I was in a situation actually whereby I actually made a video about Nkunku replacements on Sunday evening. And this was when his price was 6.5 and Noni Maduiki's price was 6.4, and then didn't act on it. And then their prices have effectively switched. So I'll be honest, I just kind of fell asleep, literally. So am I annoyed? Probably, because it's locked me out of other 6.5 options I could have considered. I could have switched Nkunku out for Morgan Gibbs-White and other players in that category. And now I'm locked into looking at 6.0 options as well as 5.5 options if I really wanted to switch him out before the international break. But yeah, he's quote unquote starting right now, but I highly doubt that he's going to start for Chelsea in the Premier League in game week 3. So I need to take some sort of action there. Onto the front line. So Havertz against Brighton, hoping he can match or exceed Saka this time around. And if Saka once again is scoring more than Havertz, then I'd really need to do an early wildcard. Got Haaland against West Ham. Got a reasonable record against West Ham. I think he got a brace against West Ham a couple of seasons back in his opening season in the Premier League as well. So he's got the captaincy armband there. And then Isak, probably being a bit generous with the vice captaincy armband. I think what I'll do, actually, go to Mohamed Salah and I'll give him the vice captaincy armband there. So yeah, on the whole, I'm not like super confident with this team because there are some red flags in defense and Nkunku as well. Part of me is thinking that I could really downsize Nkunku for a Rodgers and then easily upgrade my defense. And Rodgers, if there is a 5.0 or is 5.1 now player I'd consider, he is literally the only one. So I need to have a think about that as well. Then defense, got Valdemarson as my sub goalie. No further explanation there. Burn, home to Tottenham. I really can't see a clean sheet for Newcastle in that match. So yeah, no further action there. He is the sub 1. Harry Winks could potentially promoting up to sub 1 after his goal involvement. And then you've got, that was goal involvement in the League Cup. And then Harwood Bellis, sub 3 against Brentford. So that is what it looks like right now. But yeah, my gut feeling on the transfer front is I really need to sell Nkunku. I'm thinking Morgan Rogers could be the way. Would I -4? I won't. It's too early for a -4. But I think what I'm potentially looking at is sell Nkunku for this game week. I think it has to be done. Had he had like limited minutes in the Europa Conference League match, I could have then have taken a risk, but I can't just take another cameo, 10-minute, 7-minute like appearance and then just hope for the best. It's just too risky. So I'd be shocked if Nkunku started against Crystal Palace. I do want some attacking Chelsea cover as well, and maybe Noni might be the way forward in that instance. But yeah, you need to cover Palmer somehow. We all bought Nkunku for that reason, and sadly, it wasn't meant to be. So that's where I'm at the moment. Nkunku out for a cheaper player, but definitely, even though other areas need addressing, I'm not going to panic and do a -4, as it were. So on to the fixtures now for game week 3. So it's a Saturday lunchtime kickoff. Arsenal against Brighton. Brighton have had a very interesting start in the post RDZ era, and I think Arsenal are going to have a big challenge on their hands, but I still call that a narrow Arsenal win. And then on to the 3 p.m. kickoffs. Brentford against Southampton. Obviously, a lot of transition happening in that Brentford team. At the time of recording, we don't know where Tony is going to go. You've got Southampton, who've been fairly reasonable in this opening period so far. Only conceded, 2 goals in 2 games, but I'd call that also a narrow Brentford win. You've got Everton against Bournemouth. Everton have had an absolutely shocking start to the season. Bournemouth looked very promising in that Newcastle United match post Dom Solanke. I'm going to call that a narrow Bournemouth win. I just feel they've got the momentum, and Everton are really struggling here. They need to sort things out as soon as possible, maybe dip into the transfer market fairly late on. You've got Ipswich against Fulham, also 3 p.m. kickoff. I think Fulham are showing a lot of promise early on. Ipswich don't look too bad either, albeit got hammered by Man City. I think it's going to be a relatively tight match, but I think Fulham will potentially edge this one. And then Leicester against Aston Villa, the other 3 p.m. kickoff. With Leicester, they've had a mixed start, shall we say, and Aston Villa obviously lost against Arsenal last weekend. But I think Aston Villa should have enough here to get the better of Leicester, so narrow Aston Villa win. Got Forest against Wolves with Nottingham Forest. A lot of potential with the way that they're playing, that the green block run of games and the players, that they should really hit the ground running, and Wolves just look absolutely like horrific in these opening games. I'd even go as far as to say that in terms of relegation, Wolves are one of those teams that could potentially be favourites alongside Everton as things stand. So I'm going to call that a Forest win. Got West Ham against Man City in the super late afternoon or early evening kickoff. Man City win, just with the way that they're playing, no questions there. On to the Sunday afternoon kickoffs. Chelsea against Palace. Of course, Chelsea had that match during the midweek, but so did many other teams, albeit for them it was the League Cup. Chelsea win there, especially with the transition that Palace have been going through with respect to the players that have been sold. Newcastle against Spurs. I think here two teams that will potentially cancel each other out. I think this will be a draw. And then lastly, we got Manchester United against Liverpool for Sunday afternoon, 4 p.m. kickoff. And United have had something about them this season, but then the match against Brighton, very disappointing. I'm gonna basically call this a narrow Liverpool win ultimately, just in terms of how Liverpool have started. So just before I go to the captaincy analysis, I wanted to also share some stats as well from FPL Gameweek. So in terms of how my team is doing in relation to the content creators who quote unquote are the engaged FPL managers, just to show you how my team stands. So 78 points last week. The league as a whole got 80 points. Many of them didn't have Mohamed Salah, but they had a balanced defense instead. A lot had Jota to cover Salah, so that gave them the edge in terms of points. In terms of total points, you can see that I am still up in that Engage Managers Content Creators League because of the way Game Week 1 started, and having had Salah and Haaland as my captain, it's done enough to keep me in good stead. Team value for me, unfortunately, has probably dipped from the start of Game Week 2. And then free transfers for Game Week 3, a lot of them actually rolled their transfer. So in my case, I've still got one at hand. In terms of chip usage, this really surprised me a lot. A very large minority, 15%, use a triple captaincy chip, and 4% have used bench boost, obviously for Game Week 1. So we can say that 19% of these engaged managers, I think there's about just under 70, 68, have already used a chip in the opening game weeks. And these are engaged managers. These aren't your run-of-the-mill casual managers here. And in terms of captaincy, we can see that, surprisingly, 86% captained Haaland. Not a surprise. A lot of them had Haaland. So 17 points for him. Mohamed Salah got 10 points, and a large minority captained him. And then you got Jota and Son as differential captains. So fair bit of diversity there for those that didn't have Haaland, but obviously the vast majority had Haaland as a no-nonsense captaincy option against Ipswich. And then onto ownership here. Now, I expect these figures to drop significantly for Game Week 3 in particular. So you can see Isak, 98.5% owned. I think a lot of managers will probably give him one final chance. If he blanks again, he will be wildcarded out or just shoehorned. Well, I say shoehorned, he'll be like chucked out for a cheaper player so that they can shoehorn in other players. Haaland, 86.4% ownership. So those that didn't own him, the few that didn't, that'll probably bump up to 100%. And then here's where I basically lose out, as it were, with Pedro Porro, 72%, Saka, 71%. And then a lot, thankfully, had Henderson, whereas I had Flecken as my goalkeeper, but a lot have Alexander-Arnold as well. So a very heavy defense for some. All of these engaged managers will have at least one premium defender, whereas I don't. They won't both have Porro. They won't have Porro and Trent Alexander-Arnold. They'll have one or the other. But then, just like myself, Nkunku for 65%, I'm expecting that to nosedive to well below 50%. Probably like maybe a quarter might still have him, even probably not even that for game week 3. I think Jota will stay steady. I think Robinson's ownership might bump up. Barco's will certainly collapse. Could see an increase for Smith Rowe and Rodgers as well. And then you got Hall, potentially might get thrown away after the international break, perhaps. I think Muniz with another blank could also fall in percentage owned. Same with Eza as well. So yeah, interesting on the ownership front. I've got a fair few of them, but if we have another week whereby the premium defenders do well, then and my budget options don't, I am going to suffer. But ultimately, on a wild card, I will have to get in at least one premium defender. And I say Pedro Porro, 5.5. Is that a premium defender when Trent's 7? I'd say with the way pricing is, probably so. But I do classify him as a premium defender as opposed to someone who's 4 and 4.5. So with all that said, I want to go into the captaincy polling data and expected FPL points for this game week as well. So I'll just bring that up in a moment. Question I asked, who are you captaining in FPL game week 3? Just over 1,000 of you voted, and very clear cut on who you're all going for. Haaland against West Ham at the London Stadium, just over 70%. Mohamed Salah, just over 11%. And then 17%, fairly large minority, have gone for other. And the option for other basically was Cole Palmer as a runaway option there. So clearly, after Haaland being fresh off that hat-trick against Ipswich, he is the favourite captain once again. And just to contextualise this in terms of expected FPL points that we can see from FPL.team. So for this game week in particular, for game week 3, Haaland against West Ham, Mohamed Salah against Manchester United, very close on the xFPL points front. So again, Haaland's heavily favoured, but the expectation is that the points will be almost matched for these two big hitters. And you've got De Bruyne, xFPL points of just over 6, and Saka, similar as well in terms of expected FPL points. Isak expected a return here against Tottenham, and you got Mbeumo against Everton, potential for a goal there as well. And then with this, Foden expected to potentially get a return against West Ham, and Ollie Watkins hasn't really hit the ground running yet. Potentially, according to the expected FPL points, this might be his chance. Cole Palmer, surprised it's only just over 5 there, 5.32. I think you could potentially get a double-digit haul against Palace, especially with the way Chelsea have played and the way Palace have played. You got Son, also expected to get a fancy return, and David Raya to lock the clean sheet potentially against Brighton. And just going further down, I'll stop at when it's cut-off point there. So Gibbs White in his match, potential for a fancy return there as well. So according to the expected FPL points on FPL.team, those are the potential options there in terms of expected FPL points among the higher rated players. So with all of that said, coming on to the EO projection, so Haaland among the engaged FPL managers, my assumption is almost all of them now own him. And with that captaincy polling data in mind, and the likelihood of him getting a healthy number of expected FPL points, I'm projecting that Haaland will get an effective ownership of 160% or more among the elite and engaged FPL managers for game week 3. Is it going to devastate your rank if he does well and you don't captain him and your other option gets reasonable returns? I think you could potentially get away with it, but if you don't have Haaland at all, and he does really well and your captain doesn't, then you're going to see a dark red arrow for game week 3, and you'd almost certainly have to wildcard. So yeah, just keep that in mind as well, that he's got the form, City are playing well. It would be not that it would be crazy not to captain him against West Ham, but he seems like a really good pick here. I do see the merit, in fairness, in also picking Mohamed Salah as well, especially with his record against Manchester United in the Premier League. It's a tough one. I'd say that if you're playing it safe, you've got a good rank, you want to protect position ahead of the international break, go with Haaland. But at the same time, if you want to do a bit of upside chasing almost, I think Mohamed Salah could be the option. And I've had a reasonable steady start, not looking to take super risks at this time of the season. So my default captain is Haaland. Could I be swayed in picking Mohamed Salah? Not right now. If I actually had a challenging start, I probably would have gone for Mohamed Salah. But for the time being, at least, I'm fairly content with having Haaland. But ultimately, from my side, just to wrap up, there are some red flags that I've addressed. Need to sort out that Nkunku situation. Can't really roll the free transfer into the international break as much as I want to, because I'm just going to see his value fall further. And I'd rather have a starting fourth midfielder for game week 3 as opposed to having him on the bench and then or relying on Harry Winks. Could I rely on him against Aston Villa? No, I couldn't. So I'll give it a final thought on who I'll potentially pick. But yeah, unless the press conferences indicate that, Maresca is going to start Nkunku, which I highly doubt. So that's something that is worth keeping in mind as well. So there we have it. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Is your team all set and ready to go for game week 3? Are you looking to roll the free transfer into the international break, or are you just going to basically go rogue in game week 3 and then just wildcard after the international break? As always, if you're able to like, share, and subscribe, that will be greatly appreciated. If you want to buy me a coffee, the link should be in the description below. Take care and all the best.